Well, as we move around the state of North Carolina, continuing to do our D1 college baseball preview, we're going to take a stop in Raleigh, and with us, our old friend with Pack Pride at 24/7 Sports, Cory Smith. How are you, man?
I'm doing good, David. How are you?
Good to have you back on. And I have my first question out of the gate. Are you tired of Zoom meetings? Are you tired? You're like, Dave has actually got me to do another one of these Zoom meetings. Are you tired of doing Zoom meetings?
Man, it's a regular part of life at this point. I'd much rather do a Zoom meeting than put anybody at risk. So I think that's the biggest thing here is I've really enjoyed doing this element because honestly, we've started doing videos with Pack Pride through this.
Yeah.
Being able to have conversations and be able to do podcasts, but also put the videos out to add a different element to it. So the rise of Zoom has been, I guess, one of the positives here. That and getting cat videos of representatives and what is it, lawyer? I forget exactly who it was. The cat video where he came out the other day and said it was like it's stuck on his face. So that was hilarious.
Yeah. And another thing is one of the pop culture things this week, make sure you don't use Gorilla Glue. So on
Yes.
no doubt it's crazy. There's already two stories this week for people that don't know, and then we'll move on to talk NC State baseball where Glue. They have one in particular. The lady has it in her hair, stuck her hair. Another gentleman I think came out there another like a day or two ago. We're recording this on Friday late morning, and it's just crazy stuff. So anyway, I've never had a problem. I've used it. I've never had a problem. So common sense prevails, but just not with them, I guess. Anyway, let's talk some before I get in more trouble. I don't want to get sued by Gorilla Glue. So let's talk about college baseball. This particular case, very excited. By the way, starting off with the fact I was really disappointed last year, very hurt, very bitter because I love college baseball so much. And we were talking right before this. I'm having to research even more than I normally do because basically we had no 2020 season except for I know with East Carolina's case it was 17 games. I guess people had around, somewhere in that ballpark for everybody. So it's kind of a fresh start, so to speak, for this year.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think, for NC State, they were in a really good position with, two guys, but especially with the battery of having Nick Sweeney and Patrick Bailey last year, which both ended up going to the Giants in the top 5 rounds last year because they had such a limited draft. But, you know, one thing about it, they lost those two players, but they have some serious talent to back them up last year, and they'll get both of them back. Luka Tresh, a guy that we'll talk about here in just a little bit, and they have some really young pitchers that they think have a chance to step up, and Chris Villeman and Sam Highfill that can step up in that spot to be able to kind of fill those spots in the rotation. So yeah, it was frustrating to see it in the way that it did, but NC State feels really good about where they are going into the season because of having those spots slightly filled.
Well, it starts at the top, and I have a lot of respect for Coach Elliot Avent. He's a tremendous coach, and I know it's over 2 decades. I don't know the exact year, but it's over 2 decades he's been there at the program. And of course, you guys have a rich tradition. You have a great program there in Raleigh, and with Coach Tanner, who was there before him, did a great job. And of course, he's the AD at South Carolina now. But NC State is known for its baseball. So is in our case with East Carolina. So. Um, have a mutual respect for him. And it starts, I always tell, people talk about the weakest link. It starts at the top, and it starts with a great coach. And I know the coaching staff and the people behind the scenes, you don't even know their names, but they're working their tails off and making it look easy for the people that you do see.
Yeah, you talk a little bit about Coach Avent, but Chris Hart, a guy that's behind him, that's been his assistant for almost as long. I mean, he's a guy that's been here throughout all the 2000s. So, they've had some continuity at the top of the staff, and Coach Avent, he's one of those guys that you talk to him after a win, and you're going to get everything that he has in him. You talk to him after a loss, and he's fiery, and that just goes to show you just how much he loves to win. And he's been frustrated over the years, and he felt like last year he had a chance to really make a run in the college baseball playoffs last year, but they feel really good about where their roster is heading into this year, and a big part of that is because of the fact that Coach Avent has been able to construct a team of veteran players, some JUCO players that came into the program that have a chance to make a big impact, and some really good young players. And I think that's, it's a credit to him and a credit to Coach Hart, who's been their leader in recruiting over the last several years.
One question I have, and of course we had Dave Nathan on for UNC, with having the coaching change with Coach Fox retiring, and of course Forbes has been there for a long, long time. Do you guys see that? Would NC State see that as an advantage, having that Avent is still there and he's now the senior as far as the number of years he's been coaching at NC State? As far as when I'm talking about recruiting is what I'm talking about. You said guys coming in. Does that give them an advantage?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, you know, like I'm not going to try to typecast anybody here, but the two of them have, UNC and NC State have always kind of, recruited a different type of player. NC State's always looking for kind of that, that gritty, they want a speed guy, but they want, guys that are kind of, grit players. They're going to be, really tough. And, for, I'm not going to say what UNC recruits. Obviously they recruit a lot of talented players. But NC State, they kind of recruit a similar base to what ECU does, where you have some, Southern kids, down home kids that are, just tough players too. But what they've done over the last several years is be able to recruit the state of North Carolina really, really highly. They brought some guys in that they feel really good about. One kid that I always want to bring up, Austin Pace, a right-handed pitcher for NC State, 6'10",
Wow.
that they potentially have coming up this year. So,
Are you kidding me?
yeah, and that's a kid that potentially comes out of the bullpen. So,
Oh my
uh,
God.
they've got some kids that they feel really good about, and part of that is because of the fact that, as you mentioned, they have the seniority kind of now in recruiting the state of North Carolina, and that's really worked out for them over the last several years.
No doubt about it. And that's one of the things that if you're an AD watching right now, please don't fire a guy after a couple of years, because Coach Avent is a great example of someone that's built a program. He's been there a long time. And when I say a long time, I don't mean that as a slap in that. Some people see that I'm talking about that experience matters. And when you can build a program that's solid, and I mean, you guys been to Omaha, I mean, a whole bunch of regionals. I mean, we could go on and on and on. But it's just a testament to me. I love when you see a case like Coach Avent, being at one school, and the fact that he stayed there. He has enough talent that he could have left, but NC State does a good job, and I'm glad that he stayed there and built that up. Let's talk. Speaking of building up, let's talk about. I guess we can talk about the roster a little bit. As far as pitching is concerned, pitching is going to be, I think, even bigger. We'll talk about COVID in a little bit. I want to do roster first, and then I'll get to COVID. But pitching, I think, is going to be even bigger. Like, it's always been the elephant in the room, so to speak, Cory. But it seems like you're going to need even more pitchers now, with who knows what's going to happen with COVID-19, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But what about roster wise with pitching? How do you think the Wolfpack look this year?
Yeah, well, I mean, this isn't even the starting rotation, but one of the guys that they get back at the back end there, you always need really good closers. You need somebody that's going to be able to step in and fill that spot. And NC State gets a really good one back in Kent Kleiman, who was actually nominated for Stopper of the Year last year at the NCAA level. He probably had a chance to, if he had left, go to a program where he could have, gone to somewhere else and been, maybe crack the starting rotation or try to do something along those lines. But he has some serious talent when it comes to being a closer. He can also step in at any time and be a guy that can play, bridge a gap. He can pitch for extended innings. So, but when it comes to the starting rotation, I think for NC State, it's going to be kind of up in the air because I was texting. We actually have a podcast starting next week that's going to be completely devoted to just NC State baseball.
Cool.
Andrew
What's it
Sensen,
called?
Andrew Sensen. It's actually called Sawyer and Sensen. So it's going to be Alex Sawyer, which is one of our beat writers, and then Andrew Sensen, a former first baseman and third baseman for NC State during that 2013 College World Series run.
Oh, cool.
Those two guys are going to be taking that podcast over. I texted them and I was like, hey, what do you think about this rotation before I jump on this podcast? Like, who are the guys that you think have a chance? And Reed Johnson is a guy that returns that, has been a starter for the last 2 years for NC State. So he's kind of the given. Chris Villeman is another guy that was a freshman last year, but you could see the clear talent for him. Those are kind of the two that we think have a really good shot to be the guys. And then it's up to David Harrison was a guy that came in last year and filled that Sunday role, played really well when he was asked to, and also Sam Highfill was a guy that last year was more of the bullpen guy, and he's kind of filled that gap. It has a chance to be a starter too. So they've got 3, 4, potentially 5 guys with some other freshmen coming in that they feel good about at those spots. But like you said, you have to go really deep in that potential rotation. So they have a lot of guys that they feel like can fill that void if necessary.
And Cory, we know in a normal year, it's going to take a lot of arms to get you to Omaha. And we mentioned about with Coach Avent how we have a lot of respect for him with making a deep run. And the cool thing as far as when it comes to COVID-19, maybe a blessing in disguise, is that you're going to have a deeper roster on just about every team in the country, I would think. And you know what, this year you need it. So as far as the bullpen and the starting rotation, it sounds like the Wolfpack are going to be very deep this year.
Yeah, I mean, and I want to point out some of the other guys in the bullpen too, because Evan
Okay.
Justice is a player that has been with the program for I believe his 4th year. He's listed as a junior, but everybody that's listed as a junior now has a chance to be a 4th year guy. And then at the same time with Kobe Engel is a guy that comes into the program that's a true freshman, but he's been a highly recruited player for NC State, right-handed pitcher, and then Cameron Cotter played a lot for them last year. And then Austin Pace that I mentioned beforehand has a chance to kind of crack in there as 6'10" guy. And then, one other one too, Dalton Feeney was a player that was able to come back last year and play some, but he has a chance to be fully healthy and ready to go this year. And that gives them a lot of options in that bullpen in the event that you end up having, a case or two that takes somebody out. That you've got a lot of arms in that bullpen too.
And that's the thing that it comes down to. Another thing that I know that coach is good at, and a lot of the college coaches that we follow as far as a little bit more distantly with North Carolina, but with player development is so huge. And I guess that's one of the reasons why D1 baseball is so big, is because the development of players locally, regionally, statewide, and then you obviously can kind of cherry pick nationally. But player development, I know, is huge at NC State, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, here's the thing. Like I was just talking about 2 seconds ago, at the beginning of the podcast, they lose Patrick Bailey, a guy that is listed as potential first rounder, goes first round to the Giants. They replace him with Luca Tresh, a guy that is listed as a top 100 prospect coming into this year. Luca Tresh was not playing very much last year, but when he did, he came in and was just hitting bombs. And then you've got another, you lose Nick Swinney, and you feel good about the young arms that you have potentially coming in behind him, whether it's David Harrison, whether it's Chris Villeman, or Sam Highfill, having a chance to fill those spots. And that doesn't happen without exactly what you were just talking about, player development, where you bring a lot of guys into the program, you build them up over the years, and you see that realized. You go back to Trey Turner, a guy that's been killing it for the Nationals over the last several years.
Mm-hmm.
He came in, as a guy that was, I believe, drafted like outside of the top 20 rounds coming out of high school in Florida. And he comes to NC State and he's a surefire. People were upset that he wasn't taken in the top 10 overall picks back in 2014. So that goes to show the type of player development that he's had in this program for years and years now.
That's my favorite team in baseball, so very happy to have him win it year before last. And I guess we'll let the Dodgers have theirs. It was they spent about $3-4 billion. I'm just joking on their payroll, but
well, if they had played an additional 100 games like normal, then maybe that's when the Nationals made their run 2 years ago. Was those last several games?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Nobody gave them a chance.
It sucks that they had it taken away.
No doubt about it. As far as the we talked about pitching, as far as the infield, How are things shaping up there? Another thing that's great about, um, and I know I praised Coach Avon a lot, but the very fact that you have a coach that's been there a long time, you're talking about reloading. You got another thing that comes to mind, no matter what the sport is, you keep having this coaching rotation. You can't build the depth like you want to. And I know that NC State, the great thing about depth means you have a lot of competition. Competition is a great thing.
Yeah, yeah, no, I completely agree. And the big thing for State is coming into this year, they have really good infielders actually. With Voidominchik coming back, he's going to be at third base more than likely again. Jose Torres, a guy that's being looked at as a top, potentially first round pick. Even as he's still listed as a freshman. This is his second year with the program, but he was a player that really came on early and often last year, being in the top three of their lineup throughout the season. And then Austin Murr is another guy that was a transfer that came in from Stillwater and Des Moines to NC State, and he was their first baseman all last year. And then Tyler McDonough is a guy that we don't know exactly where he's going to fit in because he's listed technically as an infielder or an outfielder. And then Devontae Brown, another guy that is infielder slash outfielder, could be put in either one of those spots. So that's where they're at. I mean, all those guys that I listed. I mean, we're just talking about the infield here. All those guys that we listed could be in the top five of the actual starting lineup for NC State. That's how good they've been over the last few years. And then moving over to the outfield, Johnny Butler is a guy that has been their number one and their number nine in the starting lineup because you want to have speed at both of those spots. But Butler, depending on his bat, can be in any of those positions. So that right there, just those spots that I just mentioned, those guys could be infield, outfielder at any time in those spots.
Very excited there. And as far as the outfield is concerned, are there guys that that are definitely like starters that are, yes, they're coming back. They're the lock for left, center, and right.
Yeah, well, like I just mentioned, it's gonna be where they end up fitting those guys in because you can't keep some of those bats out of the lineup that I just mentioned. Devontae Brown was a guy that just absolutely crushed it last year. He had a really good summer back in 2020 or 2020. Or no, I take that back. I'm getting years mixed up. He had a really great summer in 2019, and then comes to NC State. After not playing his freshman and sophomore year, really and just absolutely crush it. If they had a 10 round draft last year, he might have gone to the MLB as opposed to coming back to NC State. Terrell Tatum is another player that we're not exactly sure how he's going to fit in. He's a really good speed player, but at 6 foot, 167 pounds, he hasn't really hit the ball particularly well for State over the last few years. So if he can find his bat, he's another great player. Noah Souls is somebody that I've been told coming into the program as a freshman has a chance to be a good bat for NC State. So we'll see where he fits in. But as I mentioned before, with Devontae Brown and with take that back, Tyler McDonough, those two are kind of versatile pieces that could be moved around from the outfield to the infield. So those guys will fit into those spots too. And I think that's going to be the interesting part about this team is they have so many versatile players that they feel like they can move those guys around. If somebody, as we were talking before, if somebody ends up having COVID, they feel good about the depth that they have at all those spots.
Are there players that maybe that are young or maybe they've been on the bench that are kind of, I hate to use the term dark horses, but guys that maybe diamonds in the rough that we don't know about that potentially could see some more playing time?
Yeah, like I said, Terrell Tatum is one of those guys that if he
Okay.
can start hitting the ball, he's a good defender. Playing the outfield spots. He's got really really good speed. So when he gets on, he can steal two bases
Oh
and
man,
and get himself in position.
my kind of
Voidomin,
player.
yeah, exactly. And Voidominchik is a guy that I think hasn't been talked about enough. This is his third year with the program, but he's played really well the first 2 years. A guy out of the Czech Republic that has played some third base, has played all over the infield with the exception of first base. And but Jose Torres is going to be locking that shortstop position down again this year. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up, because he is probably their third baseman, but he's got a great bat. And then another guy that I don't feel like a lot of people have been talking about, and I just mentioned him, Johnny Butler. He is a junior on this team, but a lot of the other bats have been getting plenty of attention throughout the offseason. He's somebody that I think can come in and be really, if he gets hot early on, whether he's at the 1 or the 9 position in that lineup, he has a chance to be really good. And then the last one that I'll bring up, JT Jarrett, a guy that's 5'10", 160 pounds. And I wouldn't even say, I don't even think he's probably 160 pounds. It's probably being generous to him. But he comes up to the plate, and I mean, he can hit the living crap out of the ball. So if he comes up there, he's got a small strike zone, and if you put it in it, he can hit it. So he's somebody that isn't an easy out by any means. So even if he's not getting good hits, he's putting together really good at bats. So he'll be somebody to watch this year for sure.
Very exciting times. Now, one of the things we're not excited about, I want to talk about to get out of the way, we'll talk scheduling in just a little bit. For folks wondering when are you going to talk about the schedule, we will. But COVID-19 has been the thing. I'm tired of talking about it. I really, before we talk about NC State, this is an idea I have. I understand people were at 65 in North Carolina, 65 plus pretty much around the nation. But I really believe that the simple thing to do to save a lot of the athletes and help athletic departments out there, let all the athletes go ahead and vaccinate them. Go ahead and get it. Let's, with on NC State basketball and now East Carolina basketball have had to deal with a whole bunch of COVID-19 issues. And the best way to handle it is just go ahead, and these kids are on a college campus. They're going to go to parties. We know they are. But we know that we got classes a lot of times, not as much in person right now, but they're going to be close together, living close quarters. Go ahead and vaccinate them. Let them be. Let's go ahead, and that shouldn't be a problem. That shouldn't be an issue. And I'm very frustrated. I know it sounds like I'm selfish as a fan or a guy that member of the media as far as sports, but I just really believe that it's obvious. It's one of those things that it's common sense. Go ahead and vaccinate them, and then you and I can, instead of spending time and talking about COVID-19 and a preseason interview, we can actually be talking about baseball the whole time.
Yeah, I definitely think that's going to be something that'll more than likely be implemented over the summer. So we're not having to worry about it at all, hopefully, by the time the fall rolls around for football and then basketball
Right.
eventually. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think with baseball programs, especially with the fact that there's not as big of a roster. You're talking about, less than 50, more than likely less than 50 people
Right.
truly involved, from an on field basis when it comes to these programs. If you get into all the athletic trainers, you get into, which obviously they need to be vaccinated, but and if you get into all the people, grad assistants involved with the program, SIDs, that's when you get into probably 70 to 75. But if we're talking about strictly on field and people that you're worried about there, yeah, I mean, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be able to. And especially when we're talking about, there's been places all over North Carolina here lately. I know in Johnson County recently they had 2,000 vaccines, and they got as
Right.
many people in there as they could, and then they realized, hey, we've only given away 550. We've only got like two
Right.
hours left of this thing, and nobody's coming out. So we've got to
Right.
be smarter about it. And I think if you're giving it to a specific area of need, and I think in this case, these athletic departments need this. I mean, baseball is not a big money grab for a lot of these places, but the NCAA tournament, once they get there, it is. So this is an opportunity for them to get all these players vaccinated and truly show that safety is the utmost issue or utmost concern for them.
I just had someone call me right before our interview and told me that if anybody that's an atheist out there, there's a God, because they were not going to get the shot, not going to get the shot. The health department in the area just called and they had way more vaccine. That's why I brought that up when you said
Yeah.
that, it triggered a memory. So, and the person this afternoon is getting the shot. Thank God, because there's no way in the world that person was ever going to get the shot. So miracles do happen every day, my friend.
That's
And
great.
as far as NC State baseball, how have they been affected by COVID-19? Have you seen? I haven't really heard anything, so that's why I was trying to about that.
Yeah, I haven't really heard anything out of the program in terms of that. They've stayed, pretty safe. I'm sure there's stuff behind the scenes, and I'm sure there's players that have had it, and we'll find out throughout the season as players are available and they're not available. We don't really keep as close of tabs on the baseball roster throughout the offseason as we do, football
Right.
or basketball. Just because those are the ones that people want to know about, especially on our site where we're subscription based. They want to that's the information they want to obtain at all times. So, but yeah, hopefully with baseball we're good to go. I have been told there's potentially some injuries that could keep some guys off the field, but we'll find that out as we get closer to the season. We'll be able to talk to actually Coach Avent next week, and we'll also have Coach Hart that I was talking about earlier. We'll have him on as the first guest for Sawyer and Simpson when we put that out next Thursday, the day before the start of the season against VMI.
Hard to believe that we're a week away as we're recording this.
Yeah,
1 week. It's crazy, man. I'm so excited. Very hurt about the season last year, so it's great to put that in the rear view and focus on that. As far as scheduling is concerned, you were talking about BMI. What about, can you give us highlights of non-conference? And I know most of the time it's going to be ACC country, right? A lot of ACC games this year, if my memory serves me right, for the conference.
yeah. Well, I know some ECU fans listening to this are probably frustrated that it doesn't include ECU. I know I've heard on Twitter every time we talk about baseball, it's like, why are you scared to play ECU? No, I don't know that it's anybody scared. I think it's just not working out this year. In terms of being able to schedule, because you usually want a series if you're going to play that. But the nice thing is, if any of these games get canceled, hopefully the two of them can get together and put something together. So it's not completely off the docket this year.
How
But
about
yeah,
yeah, the fact that they were going to do it at Mudcat, at Five County,
I
um,
know.
that was a cool thing that was going to happen. So I'm hoping that both coaches can get together and make that happen, and I think they will. I think that this COVID situation has been so crazy. We'll give them a pass this year. It's been outrageous with I can't imagine scheduling and that, but you're right. If there is something that break, like a series with Rhode Island for East Carolina or whoever it is, VMI for state, or something happens where the state says, hey, you can't travel like we had last year, then I'm sure that it's only a phone call away. And as far as busing is concerned, I mean, Greenville to Raleigh and Raleigh to Greenville is a easy trip.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's the thing too, is you got to think about the budget here. You got to think about, and that's why we've had some games canceled for NC State, and in terms of basketball. And the first thing we look at is, hey, all right, if they have to reschedule this, who are they going to play? Probably in-state teams, because of the fact that the budget is less. You don't have to stay overnight at those places, and as you were mentioning, it's a quick bus ride, so you're not having to worry about that as much. But going back to NC State's schedule, they actually play the first 11 games, I believe it is, of the season. They'll play at Doak Field. So they have the first two, the first opening series against VMI, and then Georgia Tech and Miami come to town. They'll have Campbell and UNCG, again, more in-state programs coming to Raleigh. And then actually the first 14 games are going to be inside of the state of North Carolina, because their first series is at Duke, at the Durham Bulls Athletic Park. So they won't have to travel very far at all for those first 3 weeks, and then they play at Coastal Carolina. And I think that the series against Miami, the series against Georgia Tech, that's going to really kind of figure out where the strength of the ACC is, because those two programs are picked to be two of the top programs in the Coastal Division, and then Duke is also picked to be. I've seen some people say they have a chance to be a College World Series dark horse this year, because they're so good based off of what they've done the last couple of years. So it'll be interesting to see what NC State's able to do over those first 3 weekends, because then they're going to travel to Louisville, or they're going to have Louisville come to Raleigh, and Louisville is the preseason favorite to win the ACC. So if they can finish those first three or those first 4 weekend series really strong, and get 3 series wins out of those, then they're looking at being one of the top teams in the ACC, which is where most people peg them. They were picked number 2 in the Atlantic this year.
And Corey, we had Mike Rooney on from D1 Baseball and ESPN, and he said that the ACC is definitely going to be. He said the ACC, SEC, and Big 12 are the three conferences that's going to get a lot of love from the selection committee. He feels like preseason. In fact, he has, if my memory serves me right, I think he said 11 teams out of 14 going to going to a regional, and that's just incredible to think about. 11 out of 64. So that'll be that'll be interesting. But it's no shock because ACC baseball, in my opinion, is very underrated. You always hear about basketball, and you'll normally this is a down year for ACC basketball, but football has been the darling in recent times with Clemson and everything. But this year, I mean, but consistently, ACC baseball has always been good.
Yeah, I mean, like I was just talking about, Georgia Tech, Duke, Miami, the first 9 games that NC State is going to play in ACC play, those are all 3 teams that could very well, not only go to regionals, go to super regionals, and try to crack the College World Series, and then you come back home after the Duke series and play against Louisville, that is being looked at as a not only a College World Series contender but a favorite going into this year based on the amount of talent that they return. North Carolina's a little bit down this year. We'll see about Notre Dame. We'll see about Virginia Tech, those types of programs. But, Boston College has looked really good over the last several years. Clemson is always a really good team. Wake Forest looks like a strong team coming
Really
into
good.
this year. They've got some really good offensive players. And then, Pittsburgh is, kind of a we'll see. All the northern teams are always a little bit difficult to predict because we don't know exactly what conditions are going to be like
Right.
when the season starts. That they're going to be able to play all their games, and then Florida State, a team that has been a powerhouse for years. We'll see where they're at. They didn't really get full season after losing their head coach for so long, and UNC is going to be in the same situation where they're kind
Right.
of trying to figure out things with a new head coach. So those will be 2 interesting programs to watch throughout the year. But yeah, the ACC, I agree. I think at the very least 9 or 10 teams get into regionals this year, and NC State is hoping to be able to host a regional this year again. But that, as I said, that ACC slate, if they start off, they don't start off strong, it's going to be really difficult to be able to crack that regional.
No doubt about it. And certainly it's going to be a lot of fun this season. Cory, I know that before we let you go, you guys will pack pride and we're going to give you a chance to tell people where to go. But as far as football is concerned, I know we're doing a D1 baseball preview, but how did things go as far as a signing class and with Dave Doran? And he's speaking of a tenured coach, he's been there a while, not as much as Avent has, but he's been there a while now. How did things go for you guys?
Yeah, well, the signing class, they actually signed less players than you normally would because normally you take a 25 player class. They took 19 in terms of true freshmen coming into the program, but they got a lot of talent. I believe by our count, between the composite rankings and the 24/7 rankings, they'll bring 6 players in that are 4-star caliber players, out of those 19, and one of them being a top 75 player in the entire country, and Jordan Poole at the linebacker spot. And then, Aaron McLaughlin, another interesting name. And then you get Micah Crowell inside of the state of North Carolina. But, some of these kids haven't played since the 2019 season. For Micah Crowell, he hasn't played since the 2018 season because he missed the
Wow.
entire 2019 season due to injury. And
Wow.
then they didn't play in 2020. The East Forsyth is supposed to be playing this spring,
Right.
and he said, I'm going to NC State. I'm going there in January. I'm going to go, into spring camp and try to, earn a spot. So, but yeah, I mean, one of the big reasons why they didn't take a lot of players, they didn't take a full class. They took a lot of transfers and grad transfers that are coming in this year, competing for those spots and adding depth because they feel really good about where they are. Returning 10 starters on the defensive side of the ball. The only guy they lose is Aleem McNeil that went to the NFL draft and has a chance to be, a day 1 or day 2 pick, depending on what he does in the combine. And then on the offensive side of the ball, they return everybody. The only player they really lose is Kerry Angeline, a tight end. They only passed it to him 25 times this past year. They've underutilized the tight end spot for entirely too long. But they also get Devin Leary back. That is going to be kind of the wild card here. Is he was a guy that came in for 3 games. They won all 3 of those games under him. He passed for 4 touchdowns against Pittsburgh on the road in the first game that he started. But he has a chance to be if he can come in and be that type of quarterback again, NC State feels really good about where they are going into this year and competing for trying to compete for an ACC championship. Clemson is obviously the one team that you have to be able to get past to be able to get there, especially in the Atlantic Division. But that's their first. That's the ACC opener for them. So you find a way to somehow win that game, and that's what they're trying to go for.
The last time this will tell my age, Corey. The last time the ACC championship went to in Raleigh for football, I was in first grade, and it's an enigma. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing. It's just crazy because I know we've had Florida State and Clemson in recent times over the last couple decades and all, but it just seems to me like with all the great players that have come in there, good coaches, it's just really strange. I think it was 79, right? It was 79 or
Yeah.
80. The last I was in first grade. I'm like, and it wasn't last year. That was in first grade. So it's just amazing how it's been such a long time, and I feel like NC State is due at some point, especially with, you look at the number of talented players that come in under Dave Doran. We have a friend of ours, a colleague, Terry Gallagher, that comes on the show, former East Carolina player, and he goes down normally to the Senior Bowl, and he always tells us how many great players that have gone to down there
Hmm.
to Mobile. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. With hopefully we'll have fans in the stands in Carter Finley, Dowdy, Ficklin, whoever you pull for. Hopefully we can have fans back in the stands at least by the fall. Before we let you go, how can people find your work? And I appreciate you coming on and the visit again, man.
Yeah, as always, you can visit packpride.com. That's through 24/7 Sports. And then, you can find us at Pack Pride on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. Our Facebook is, I believe it's NC State Athletics or NC State Wolfpack on 24/7 Sports. But you can always just search Pack Pride on Facebook and it'll pop up as one of the first things. You can also follow our podcast too, not to create a rivalry here with the
No,
podcast,
that's
but
fine. Hey, we always know. No, it's not. We're
yeah,
not
you
like
can
that.
always find that on Pack Pride too. So we always post all of ours on as stories too. So you'd be able to find that and any podcasting app too. And as I mentioned, we'll have our baseball one starting up next week. Shooting the first one on Wednesday with Coach Hart, and then that'll be coming out on Thursday.
Sounds good. And hopefully, let's keep our fingers crossed with baseball. Everybody right now, by the way, one final thing I'm going to say. If you're part of Pac Nation, if you're part of NC State or East Carolina, wherever, please get your shot. If you want to be in the stands, then you have no excuse. If you don't get the shot, then that's probably why we don't have a packed house. So anyway, Cory, thank you so much, man. Appreciate you so much. You guys do a great job at Pack Pride, and love to have you back on during the season, see how NC State's doing.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for having me on, David. I'm excited.